abbiamo alla mia destra abbiamo Palazzo Chigi, il famoso palazzo del potere, della politica, di tutto quello che è in questo momento, e virtualmente siete con noi per un convegno che è molto, il tema di questo convegno è molto caldo, molto in questo periodo su tutte le notizie, su tutti i social, su tutta la situazione dei giornali, dei ministeri, sono anche le parti, diciamo, tecnica. Siamo insieme al Palazzo INPS, sempre al Palazzo LUGLIO.NET, Piazza de Colonna, siamo al convegno sull'immigrazione, sui dati sia italiani che europei per questa immigrazione. Può essere negativo, può essere positivo? Andremo a scoprirlo con tutte le immagini su questo evento, questo convegno. Ringraziamo l'ufficio stampa dell'INPS che ci ha invitato a scoprire questo convegno e a scoprire tutto quello che c'è dietro le quinte in immigrazione e tutto quello che c'è, perché International Workshop on Immigration, l'opportunità insieme a tutta l'Europa di scoprire che cos'è l'immigrazione, non solo i barconi, che ultimamente il ministro interno Salvini, che avete visto il nostro video a Viterbo per la presentazione del candidato di Viterbo, che ha vinto, ne ridiamo gli auguri a Giovanni Arena, il nostro sindaco di Viterbo, e anche tutti gli altri di centrodestra che hanno vinto in tutta Italia, a favore per la non più migrazione sul sud Italia, sul nostro territorio, ma in tutta Europa. Punti di riferimento, dati e tecnici. Tra qualche secondo Patrizia Battista all'INPS, convegno di questo caldo tema di questo periodo, immigrazione, Italia e Europa. Tra qualche secondo con tutte le notizie. A tra poco.
So I don't think I need to convince you that immigration is today at the core of the political debate in Europe as well as in the US, and that the way native voters perceive issues related to migration is an important determinant of the party electoral success of faith. However, what we also observe at the same time is that immigrant population constitutes a rising share of domestic electorates in hosting societies, which means that another way in which immigrants can affect the politics in destination countries is through a direct impact, since immigrants can vote themselves. So there is a recent economic literature interest in studying the relationship between immigration and politics. And I like to show usually this figure, which is somehow representative of the main message by this literature. So this figure is taken by a recent paper by allied authors, and in this figure there is on the x-axis the share of immigrants, and on the y-axis the share of votes for extreme right-wing parties. And there are 15 EU countries' national election over a period of 40 years in this graph. And as you can see, the main idea of from the figure is that there is a positive correlation between the share of immigrants and vote for extreme parties. Now, of course, this figure is just a correlation, but most of paper in this literature try to go deeper and to establish a causal relationship between the presence of immigrants and extreme vote. So with my paper, what I want to do is to contribute to this literature, but studying a slightly different channel. So what I want to do is to study how extending body rights at local level to immigrants of extra-EU origin can influence electoral outcomes in hosting society. What I'm able to estimate will be what I call an aggregate effect, which is basically the sum of a direct effect given by the fact that the immigrants can vote, and an indirect effect given by the fact that natives voters can react to the enfranchisement of immigrants. So in order to study this effect, I can exploit the quasi experiment given by the approval of a new law in 2004 in Belgium. And I will employ a difference in difference strategy with a continuous treatment, which allow me to compare municipality with a different share of extra EU voters before and after the reform. I will separately analyze the effect in the two regions of Flanders and Wallonia, and the reason why I will do that will be there in a few slides. And I will show some preliminary results on heterogeneous analysis exploiting municipality characteristics within the same region. So just to give you a flavor of my findings, what I find is that there is a polarization in the electorate which move in the opposite directions in the two regions of Flanders and Wallonia. Specifically, I found that in municipalities with a highest share of extra EU immigrant voters, left parties are gaining vote in the region of Wallonia, while in the region of Flanders, center parties are losing vote. At the same time, there is a positive effect on the probability of getting the relative majority for anti-immigrant parties. As I said, I will do some heterogeneous analysis showing that the effect in the region of Flanders and above all are heterogeneous according to different dimensions. Specifically, I exploit the share of Muslim voter and crime rate in the telephone period in the municipality. And I will show you also some results from the European Social Survey, which seems to suggest that the anti-immigrant votes are not driven by worries concerning the labor market impact of immigrants, but rather I try to speculate that the effect is more driven by cultural or by the way natives perceive immigrants in the two regions. Okay, just a few details about the law. So this law passed in Belgium in March 2004. And according to the law, immigrants are of non-EU origin are allowed to vote in local election if they fulfill the requirement, which means that they should reside in Belgium without interruption in the 5 years prior to the survey. To the election. There is so in Belgium there is the principle of mandatory voting for Belgians, meaning that if Belgians fulfill the requirement to be a voter, so they have a certain age and a few other requirements, they are automatically registered to the register of voters. And if they don't show up at the election, they have to pay a fine. For immigrants, the principle of mandatory voting works in a bit different way, meaning that there is a list of all immigrants who fulfill the requirement to be a voter, but if they want to vote, prior to the election they have to register. And once they register, if they don't show up at the election, they have to pay a fine. Moreover, according to the law, immigrants are entitled only of active electoral rights. So they can vote, but they cannot serve as candidates at elections. Okay, now I'm going to spend the next couple of slides to give you an idea of the background of Belgium. In particular, I'm going to focus on the Belgian political system and how immigration policy in Belgium works, which is relevant to understand the context of this study. So, Belgian electoral system is divided according to linguistic lines. So, there are French-speaking parties who are taking part in the election in the region of Wallonia, and Dutch-speaking parties who are instead taking part in the election in the region of Flanders. Since Belgian independence in the first half of the 19th century, the main actors of the Belgian politics have been the Catholic, the Socialist, and the Liberal parties, which together took about more than 80% of the vote during the 50s. And there was subsequently the emergence of regionalist and extreme right parties, respectively in the 70s and the 80s. So these are the main actors of the Belgian politics. So a text analysis of the manifesto, of the national manifestos of these parties revealed that the debate over immigration was quite strong, let's say, in Belgium, and that the discussion on voting rights for migrants was a very silent issue, which started already back in the 70s. And moreover, the text analysis of those manifestos, which was made by some Belgian political scientists, allow me to rank parties according to their attitude towards immigrants. So we have that socialist, so the order of from more pro-immigrants to very anti-immigrants is socialist, Christian Democrats, liberal, and then in the end you have extreme right parties. Now, for what concerns instead Belgian immigration policies, in Belgium, competencies over immigration are split between the national and the regional governments. In particular, at national level are taken decisions concerning citizenship, the entrance or the removal of immigrants, while at regional level are taken all decisions on policies concerning integration of immigrants. And the two regions adopted very different models to promote integration. In particular, in the policy in the Flanders highlight the importance of cultural diversity and ethnic identities, and promote policies which combine an assimilationist policies targeting newcomers with a multicultural policies addressed to establish ethnic minority groups. So the peculiarity of this approach is that most of the actions to promote immigration are focused to specific minority groups. So somehow they want to stress the difference between natives and other ethnic groups. There is also a large network of implementing actors for such policies, which is coordinated by regional level. And as part of this integrational track, there are language courses and a civic integration course which are compulsory for immigrants. In the region of Wallonia, instead, the approach is a bit different. In fact, in the Francophone Belgium, they put more emphasis on economic and social inclusion of immigrants, which are promoted through colorblind policies, meaning that there are basically a small organization at local level who put on initiatives to promote the inclusion of immigrants. But such policies are not specifically addressed to minorities. And moreover, there are no obligation to attend courses, and also the actions to promote integration are basically taken by a single smaller organization at municipal level. There is not a centralized organization as is the case in the region of Flanders. So also it's important that the total budget devoted to policies is much lower in Wallonia with respect to Flanders. And basically this difference results in the fact that the immigrants have very different rights and duties depending on the region in which they reside. And at the same time, of course, also the attitudes of natives toward immigrants is quite different in the two regions. And I'm going to show you some evidence on that later on. Okay, so the data that I'm going to use for this project come from very different sources. In particular, I got from the Ministry of Interior data on extra-EU immigrant voters, meaning that we have information on immigrants who are entitled to vote. And then I got from the web data on election results, and I put together 5 rounds of local election, 3 rounds before the reform and 2 rounds after the reform. This year in October there will be the 3rd round of election after the reform. And I also used as control some municipality characteristics, specifically population density and share of foreigners, which were provided by the Belgian Statistical Office. And data on crimes, which I used for the heterogeneous analysis, were instead provided by the federal police. Okay, now the estimation strategy that I'm gonna use, as I said, is a basic definitive, in which let's start from my outcome variable, YDMT, which is the electoral outcome of municipality Helm in district D at election T. Specifically, as outcome, I'm going to use either the share of votes taken by each of the 4 parties that I mentioned before, so Socialist, Christian Democrat, Liberal, and Ethnic. And the reason why I do not have results for the region of Flanders in 2006 is that it's because at national level and also in many municipalities at local level, the Christian Democrat and the Ethnic Party participated in a coalition. So for now, I'm keeping this here. And so basically, the main message from this graph is that the biggest party in the region of Flanders have historically to be the Christian Democrat Party, while in the region of Wallonia, the Socialist Party. But also there is an increase in the votes for the Ethnic Party in the region of Flanders, while Ethnic Now, the dark side of this graph is, as you can see, the sum of the votes for those parties does not add to 100%. Because since I'm working with local election, of course, I have a number of very small or very small parties or civic lists which are not able to label according to their attitudes toward migration. And this is a major problem above all for the region of Wallonia, where, as you can see, on average, about
What about Brussels?
Yeah,
we didn't talk about Brussels.
Yes, exactly. I speak to the region of Brussels for now because the political system in Brussels is even more complicated because you have both the French-speaking parties and the Dutch-speaking parties can take part in the election, and basically voters can choose if they want to vote for a Dutch-speaking or for a French-speaking. So I try to do some analysis, putting together the parties. But then I knew nothing about Belgium before starting this project, and so I don't really know how to interpret these results, because you can have that, the Socialist Party of Flanders can have very different manifesto from the Socialist Party of Wallonia. So I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the Belgian Brussels. Moreover, there is another problem, which in the region of Brussels, you only have 19 municipalities. So the statistical power of my estimate will be kind of low somehow, because even if I put together 5 rounds of election, I don't end up with a sufficient number of situations. Okay, so the other outcome that I'm going to use is a dummy, defined as the probability of getting the relative majority. And again, what you can see from the graph is that in the region of Flanders, in most of the cases, are the Christian Democrats who are the first party at local level, while in the region of Wallonia are the socialists. Okay, then my treatment variable is potential voters, which is defined as the ratio between the number of extra EU immigrants entitled to vote and the population in the specific municipality. Now, I'm going to show, just to give you an idea of how my treatment variable looks like. I'm plotting here, this is the region of Flanders, while the white area there is the region of Brussels. And as you can see, there is enough variability in my treatment variable in the region of Flanders and similar in the region of Wallonia. The white municipalities there are instead the German municipality, where again you have a different political system. So I dropped 2009 municipalities from my first. Just to give you a flavor, the value of my treatment variable is quite small. I have that on average, this share is about 0.4%, and it ranges from 0 to 3 in the region to 3% in the region of Flanders, and from 0 to about 4% in the region of Wallonia. Yes.
So you have those who have voted, not the
No, I do. So I have both information actually. I have those who are entitled to vote, which is what I'm using here because I claim this is more exogenous with respect to my outcome variable. But I also have information on those who register, with a good proxy for those who vote last time. So otherwise they have to pay a fine. So, but I'm not going to exploit this information in this analysis. Okay, so as a basic diff in this framework, I'm interacting with my treatment variable with the post-dummy for the post-reform election. I also include the time varying control, which are local population densities, and share of foreigners. I cluster standard error at municipal level, and I also have an interaction of my dummy post with district fixed effect, meaning that actually my estimate is going to exploit only within district variability. Okay. So I'm going to show you the results first in the region of Flanders, and this is where I use as outcome variable the share of votes taken by each party, and I do find a significant and negative effect for the Christian Democrat Party. When I instead look at the probability of getting the relative majority again in the region of Flanders, I do find a significant effect and positive effect for the ethnic parties. while in the region of Bologna I find a quite high and significant effect for the socialist parties, while no effect and significant effect are detected for the probability of getting the relative majority. So what I do next is I try to test my identifying assumption. So in order to convince you that my estimate can have a causal interpretation, I actually want to test the fact that the trends in my outcome variable were the same in the absence of the treatment. In this framework, a way to test for this assumption is to add leads or anticipatory effect of my treatment variable. And I want this effect to be close to zero. While I would find, I would like at least to find an effect just in the after reform treatment. So again, controls are defined as before, standard error are clustered in municipality level, and I'm going to show you these results in a graph. So this is the, as you remember, I do find significant effect only for the Christian Democrat, the ethnic party, and the socialists. So I'm rerunning this fully flexible model only for those outcomes. And this is the effect for the Christian Democrat Party. And as you can see, of course, here I omitted the first election year, otherwise the model is not identified. And as you can see, there is a quite flat pattern before the reform and some downward sloping effect right after the reform. This is, again, for the region of Flanders, the effect when I look at the vote for the ethnic parties. And again, so the results before the election are never significant and smaller with respect to the results on the post-reform period. And this is, again, the same for the region of Bologna and the share of votes for the Socialist Party. So it is reassuring that I want a significant effect.
Almost everything. I don't know if everything can be understood. So we separate, of course, CAS and SPRAR because CAS are, let's say, more exogenous because it's the prefecture that chooses the place. But yes, it's not. I mean, the results are very, very similar. So also because CAS is 80% of the fund.
Okay, but they would predict very different results because of the contact theory. Because in one they are kept like inside the center, in one they are asked to interact with others. Therefore, I'm surprised if you find exactly the same result.
Okay, here we do we play a little bit with the observable. So here is the contact theory. So we try to interact the sites per se with the distance, but we don't see much. It's something like, I mean, other paper with the mosque. So you see a mosque, you are a little bit adverse, so but you don't really know how many people are there. And honestly, when I pass through my city, Cagliari, and sometimes I visit also this refugee center, I don't have an idea of how many people are there. And I don't know if this contact theory is playing a role in Italy. At least we don't see in this sample, in the CAS sample only, or in the SPRAR only. So as I said, it's not a matter of contact. It seems that the version. Then we also, instead of using the distance, the people going to I to J, from I to J. And I mean, we see similar results. Okay? But unfortunately, when we include both, it seems that the distance play a bigger role. Mediating factor. So at some point, we ask ourselves, why? So, which is the mechanism? I mean, it's because of income, it's because of education, crime. So we basically split the sample in quartile, and we investigate to different variables. So we basically study the local media diffusion, the surface per se, the population, the education, the crimes, the level of income, the employment. But I mean, you see some difference, but these differences are not really significant between the first quartile and the fourth. So we generally we don't find an interquartile difference. So just to conclude, in this paper we see if the exposure to refugee center affect voting decision in another municipality that do not host the refugee reception center. The main finding is that the closer to refugee center, the higher the percentage of people that go to vote. And this translates in anti-immigrants and anti-government votes. As we said before, sometimes it's also a matter of salience, so the referendum probably adds not to be in that particular moment. Yes, I'm done. And despite the fact that the coefficient is really statistically significant, I mean, this would not imply that the voting per se would change with or without this proximity. So we don't see. We see that the reduction of no yes gap it was only by 58 percentage points, and which was not enough to basically change the voting.
There's no relation between these two issues as far as the policy is concerned.
Apart from the fact that the opposition starts saying that the no for the constitution was also a no to Merkel, no to European.
So in the actual debate over the constitutional reform, was immigration mentioned in that at all? It was just not. So it was basically a sort of anti-establishment.
Two brief questions. First is, would it have been feasible and interesting to, in your empirical model, to separate the shares center-left, wing, right, center-right, what I mean to divide this, your dependent variables according to this distinction, to see whether the significance of the variables that you use are relevant. Second is, how do you account for these real negligible values of the R squared?
Maybe you want to collect, maybe it's better if you collect the questions. So we're one there and one there. Thank you for.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. In my sense, I'm not sure that you measure that you use a good measure for the proximity to the center. Because if you take as example big cities, the presence of center can be not visible for people. So I don't understand how it can influence the vote. My suggestion is it is possible to use the distance not to the municipality but to the electoral, I don't know how to say it in English, electoral office, and calculate with the geographical coordinate of center and the electoral office and calculate the distance. Okay.
There was another one there.
Yeah, thanks for this very interesting study and interesting outcome as well. Just a common question with regard to these POLAR and CAS centers, which are, of course, run differently, but in practice there's been a convergence also over recent times. So it's not that cars are completely closed and there are no contacts with outside world, whereas SPRA would be the complete opposite. So you can see that really there's been made a governmental effort to also ensure more integration of asylum seekers that are hosted in CAS. What one can also see that many CAS, at least in some of the Italian regions, like SPRA centers, are very small, so they follow the concept of diffuse reception, accoglienza diffusa, so as an example, they may not be visible to the citizens. So the question, did you take into account any minimum threshold for the reception capacity of the centers that you've used? Because many of them, they host 10, 20, 30 migrants, not more. And many of them are in apartments. They are not, let's say, big centers, particularly got to SPRA, but also some. And another question of clarification, you mentioned also votes in 2001, etc. I'm not sure that I've correctly understood, because at that time, of course, most of these reception centers didn't exist. It's over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, and most of these centers have been set up, and a huge effort made by the Italian government.
So very fast, we didn't really check. Very fast.
Very fast.
CAS and SPRA, you are right, but it's also a matter of that CAS are relatively younger, so probably they also need to improve to the point to reach SPRA, as far as I know, and I can see from the reports that I read. So there are still some difference. Maybe there are some cases where CAS and SPRA are very, very similar to each other, but there are also a lot of heterogeneity there. A big city and a small city, of course we drop also in some robustness, we drop the big city. I don't know what does it mean big. In Italy, 75% of the city are under 8,000 inhabitants, so I don't know, but we play a little bit in the paper with this big and small. And about the electoral stuff, really interesting, and but I don't know if we can really do it. What we do and what we did is basically reallocate the refugee center within the border, within the boundary of a municipality. So I think I was sure, but we basically randomly allocate the border within the municipality, and then we recompute the distance, and the things didn't change so much. So I don't know. Share left and right, we can do it. I think we do it in some robustness. We didn't see much, at least. I mean, there were not statistical difference between the first quartile and the fourth quartile, so we can discuss. So okay, it's more there or there, but yeah, we didn't see much. The elsewhere, yes, you are right. Yes, point taken. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the previous paper still needs some explanation on the mechanism. So if you have any good idea, you can share it with Claudio during the lunch. And this is also to make the work of a single presenter more of a value for a collective point of view. And Francesco, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much to the organizer and to everyone who is here. So this is joint work with Tommaso Frattini and Luigi Minali, and it's about labor market integration of refugees, and we are going to look at microdata for Europe. I will skip, thanks to the wonderful introduction we got from Tim, so I can skip the importance and of the refugee crisis, and this is the only two things that I may want to say is that first, clearly, now we need to think very carefully about future labor market integration of refugees who arrived in Europe in the last few years. Second, from an academic point of view, there is relatively less evidence about. There is lots of studies about assimilation of economic migrants. There is less evidence on refugee migration. So this is what we contribute to the literature. And what this paper does, we're going to use European Labour Force Survey data, the most recent data available, to look at the integration and the assimilation patterns of refugees and immigrants. And we're going to show, which is not great novelty, we're going to show a persistent and large refugee gap. And then what we think is the most important contribution of our paper is to discuss some causes of this refugee gap. And then we're going to look at the economic condition on arrival, we're going to look at asylum policies, and we'll discuss that later. Okay, so data, very briefly, so we're going to use European Labour Force Survey data. In particular, we're going to use two ad hoc models which were carried out in 2008 and 2014, which basically have many questions that we can use to look at specifically refugee migration. So what we're going to use to define, there are lots of issues in measuring refugees, so we're going to use to define refugees is a question about the main reason for migration, where the respondents would say employment.
2015 actually, until 2015 when about 890,000 asylum seekers arrived in Germany. That was at that time more than 1% of the resident population, and as you all know, these people countries from the Middle East and North African countries. So, which is what's very important for the study, and that's why we also look at that. Besides the political issues, that this group is very specific in terms of what to not just say. We want to have a look at so if we find an increase in crime, and also we see that the asylum seekers are committing more crimes, why do these people engage in these crimes? And I will hopefully present to you today, if time allows, the answers to the first two questions, and the third question we're still working on that, and I'm very happy for any input on that. So let me give you first a preview of the results. So what are we finding? So we're finding very short-term effect on crime rates, only in 2016 actually. The effect vanishes in 2017 already, so we will see that in a moment. And we find that asylum seekers with low recognition rates are driving the results. So we will, in the study, we will differentiate the inflow of asylum seekers by the recognition rates, average recognition rates of the countries of origin. And we basically have two groups at the end, and we see that our effect, which we find in 2016, is totally driven by people coming from countries with low recognition rates. And the third question, our preliminary answer to that is, that is mainly the lack of a perspective of staying in Germany, which might drive these people to commit some crime. But that's more or less just a sentence. I'm not sure whether I can still do something on that today. Okay, so as I said already, we will use a regional approach and compare districts with different inflows of asylum seekers and regress method changes in the crime rates. Of course, circumvent and related problems. We will use a regional assignment of asylum seekers, so there's also dispersal policy in place in Germany, and we will use that. Then let me briefly talk about the immigration situation in Germany. So these are monthly asylum registrations in the last 3 years, from 2014 to 2017. And what you see is that in 2014 it already slightly increased, and it spiked dramatically in 2015, or in summer and in autumn of 2015, then came to an abrupt halt in the spring of 2016 in the Balkan countries and in Austria, close to us. And basically what we do for our study is we have end of year stock data on asylum seekers, on the location of asylum seekers in the districts in Germany, and we will use the end of year number in asylum seekers, and and subtract the number of asylum seekers in 2014 and define that as our shock or net change in asylum seekers, which we use to analyze the effect on changes in crime rates in the next 2 years. So it's very preliminary. We don't have many outcome years. I mean, this is basically last year, so of course, this is very preliminary. So that we find some effects in 2016. Okay. So then let me talk about a little bit about the assignment of asylum seekers in Germany. So basically, there's this first policy in place, and when you are asylum seekers in Germany, you first will be registered by the police at the border, and where you can say that you want to claim asylum, and then you will be allocated by a specific rule, which is based 2/3 on state's population size, 2/3 on state's tax revenues, and 1/3 on state's population size, to a federal state within Germany. And then when you arrive at a federal state, you will be further allocated to a district in Germany or to a municipality, that depends on the state. So it's basically a two-tier procedure. And this, in the second stage, you will be allocated within the federal state to a district. And this is mainly based on population size. So the main goal was really to achieve an evenly distribution or even distribution of asylum seekers across the country. And that happened, so that was functioning very well in the past, but not in 2015. So there were a lot of deviations in 2015, and mainly, so that's what the authorities told us, mainly because they were overwhelmed by the sheer size of the inflow, and connected to that, we weren't able to find suitable accommodations for all asylum seekers in the districts. So they had to deviate from the originally decided approach, and that's the picture of how it looks like. So what you would expect is that within the federal state, for example, the most northern state, Schleswig-Holstein, you would expect that everything, that every district has the same color, so darker blue color is more than 100,000 residents than lighter areas, but you see some variation already here, and that is also true for other states like Baden-Württemberg and Bayern and so on. So there's a huge variation between districts, and this we will go exploit this variation in order to look at changes in crime rates. Of course, what is very important here, so I identifying assumption, if you will, is that the inflow of asylum seekers or the assignment of asylum seekers to districts is not correlated with previous trends. If you would have that, you would falsely associate the inflow of asylum seekers to already rising crime trends in the districts. And we don't want to have that. So how we check this assumption, or we try to check it, is when we regress the allocation of asylum seekers in 2015 on previous trends in crime rates, so total crimes, property crimes, violent crimes, and we don't find anything, which is reassuring for us. And we also regress the allocation of asylum seekers on other factors in the districts. For example, we control the cities over 100,000 residents, so many cities are a lot more affected than others. And basically also unemployment and others, foreigners and GDP per capita. And we basically find no impact of these characteristics. Only the share of vacant private housing is explanatory for the distribution of asylum seekers, which makes sense, and which is also the main reason of the authorities to deviate from the code. So, and our main argument is in the study, what we say is, okay, conditional on all these district characteristics, and including county district fixed effects, we will use it for different there is a random component in the allocation of asylum seekers which we can exploit, which is not related to in the Then quickly to the data. We use data from 3 different sources. The first one
persons by nationality, and also for one state, for Baden-Württemberg, by resident status, which allows us to see whether really asylum seekers or newly arrived asylum seekers are committing more crimes.
Allora, abbiamo visto adesso un convegno sul tema caldo dell'immigrazione, con tutti i dati, con tutta questa situazione dell'International Workshop of Immigration, con la collaborazione dell'INPS e dell'Associazione Italiana Economisti del Lavoro. Siamo qui al Palazzo Wedekind a giugno, fine mese di giugno, e questa è la nostra conclusione. Avete visto tutte le immagini, tutte le foto, tutto il video di quello che parlano in inglese, naturalmente. Ci sarà una traduzione? No, abbiamo scoperto che non c'era una traduzione simultanea, una pecca per qualcuno, anche per noi. Siamo in Italia, siamo a Roma e dovremmo essere sì ospitati ma fino a un certo punto. Prima di tutto l'Italia, Made in Italy, con l'Italia l'INPS. Tra qualche secondo tutta l'informazione, tutta l'inizio sui nostri titoli di coda. Patrizia Battista, Roma, Eventi su Roma, Patrizia Battista, THEWOGUE.NET. Allora, siamo sempre a piazza di Colonna, abbiamo fatto adesso l'invito del convegno del Mediterraneo, della immigrazione, i dati tecnici. Cosa possiamo dire? Grazie a tutti quelli che lavorano per dar modo che l'Italia non sia solo un porto aperto, ma sia un porto di cultura e di eventi a favore della libertà di pensiero. Siamo qui per scoprire anche i dati tecnici di questa immigrazione, sia negativi che positivi. Non si sa qual è la parte positiva, può essere per qualcuno è una cosa positiva. Tra qualche secondo tutte le notizie da Patrizia Battista al prossimo nostro On The Road. Ecco, ragazzi, siamo qui. Arrivederci.